Hello everybody and welcome to the Try Hack Me Advent of Cyber 2022 Day 8. Today's video will be a little bit more extensive than the last ones. We're going to be using metasploit, and this will take a little bit more skill than the other ones, but there's a good walkthrough below, so I think we're going to be able to be doing it together all the way through. So without further ado, my name is Avocari and it's time to get festive and crack open the 9th window of the Try Hack Me Advent of Cyber 2022. Dock the halls. So, pivoting, dock the halls. Today's task was created by the metasploit team at Rapid7. Wow, that's cool. Okay, so a note before you start, I already said it in the intro, this task is a little bit more complex, but they've ensured that the task content has all information in it. However, as there are moving parts to getting it to work, it might prove challenging. So don't worry, there are plenty of resources to help you out. They also have a walkthrough linked below. And you can also visit Rapid7 and Try Hack Me on Discord in order to get more info and help. So you've got this, see you tomorrow. Alphax Kitty will need your help more than ever. With love, the Try Hack Me team. So, because of the recent incident, Santa has asked his team to set up a new web application that runs on Docker. It is supposed to be more secure than the previous one, but better safe than sorry, right? So now it's up to Max Kitty to show Santa that there may be some hidden weaknesses before the bad guys actually find them. Okay, so we're doing some penetration testing on our own. So what are our learning objectives? We're going to be learning to use metasploit modules and metapreter. We're going to be using network to pivot, and we're going to be doing post-exploitation. So let's start off with the concepts. First of all, we're going to be talking about Docker. So Docker is a way to package applications and the associated dependencies into a single unit called an image. And this image then can be shared and run as a container with locally as a deployer or remotely on a production server. And Santa's web application and database is actually running in Docker containers. But only the web application is directly available via an exposed port. Okay, so nothing else is available other than the web application, and the common way to tell if a compromised application is running in a Docker container is to verify of the root Docker env file in the root directory of the file system. Okay, so this way we can identify whether we are looking at a Docker container or not. So now we're going to start with metasploit. So metasploit is a powerful tool for testing and penetration testing. It is free and open source and owned by the cybersecurity firm Rapid7. So for metasploit, we're actually using the MSF console. I'm actually going to start in the background because this takes some time. We can view sessions, we can upgrade them, we can do stuff in the background. We can use metapreter. Metapreter is also a way to do payloads. We have multiple important commands such as sysinfo to get the information about the remote system. We can upload files, we can display interfaces, and we can resolve host names. So now that we have that, in Metasploit's console you can upgrade the last opened Metasploit session to a metapreter session with sessions tag u tag -1. And you can identify the open session types with the session command. Okay, so I'm not going to go over that at the moment. We can see the active sessions, but we're going to be talking about pivoting now. So when we have now entry to the system, we are able to pivot through the different machines. Remember, on one of the first days, we learned about the principles of penetration testing and how to gain access to network. There was one part, which is pivoting. So the initial foothold could be done through a web application running on a Docker container. But through that, there could be an exposed port to a Windows machine, for instance. And so we could use that as a launchpad to attack other systems. In order to discover pools, we can use nmap and arp to find additional machines and services. which were maybe previously inaccessible. So this is called never pivoting. So we start here, we connect to the compromised container, and then we might find other containers or other Windows or Linux machines in the same network. So now they tell us to launch the try hack me Kali Linux. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use my own Linux version for today's tasks. We're going to be using metasploit. If you're using web-based Kali, you can use it with MSF console. Yeah, I already started that. So we can do multiple commands. We can search for a module. We can load a module. We can view the information of a module. And we can then directly run the module as well. And we can then use metapreter to pivot. We have the SOX proxy. So I'm not gonna go through those parts right now. But we're gonna be doing the challenge walkthrough together. So first of all, let's look at the questions we need to answer. Just go back down to all the way to the bottom. So I want to try to do most of that by myself without looking at the tutorial. So first of all, let's deploy the attached VM. We did that. And then let's try to find out which ports are open. So we're gonna do another mmap scan on 10.10.3625. Always forgetting that. So we have one port open. This is port 80 HTTP. I reckon we could also just look at that. In the browser, maybe we find something, maybe there's a website running on it. Okay, this is just some sort of lorem ipsum. But we see here we have Laravel version 8.26.1 with PHP version 7.4.30. You can click here, here, and here, nothing happens, so I guess that's everything. Okay, so what framework is the web application developed with? We already saw that. Laravel, I think it was. Laravel. There we go. So what CVE is the application vulnerable to? So for that, we're gonna do some recon again. We're gonna go to exploit book hack tricks. That sounds correct, but we also use a GitHub repository maybe. Let's see, by Bionics Laravel exploits. Exploit for... We have just one exploit. There is no version number here, so maybe that works. But first of all, let's quickly look through the hack tricks one. Vulnerable versions 5 to 6. We have 8. Another deserialization to SQL injection, but I guess that that CVE should be the correct one. Yes, so vulnerable to a CVE. That is good. What command can be used to upgrade the last open session to a metapreter session? So if you do not recall what we talked about earlier on, in order to upgrade our session, we can look at the top right here, where we said we want to upgrade it. Here it is, sessions tag u tag 1. We're gonna change to the metapreter and executing on sessions. Might as well. No, you can identify the open sessions by typing sessions. We have no active sessions. Okay, so we don't need to use that right now, but we can actually also just answer that question now. So that way we can upgrade the last session. What file indicates a session has been opened within a Docker container? So that was the .docker env file. What file often contains useful credentials for web applications? So that could be a config file, for instance, or a database. I'm not sure if we can answer that already. So what database table contains useful credentials? Okay, so for that we now need to actually connect to the environment. Okay, so we now started up our metasploit. So let's start to first search for the exploit. Search Laravel. Is there anything we have here? Yes, and the debug RCE, remember this was the one we found on GitHub. So that is actually perfect. That's what we want to use. So we can now use our first payload and we use the ignition Laravel debug RCE. So what we now could do is, as the first part, we could now check whether it is actually vulnerable or not. So let's see what actually is available to us here. We can use info. You can see the target pod is 80. We need to set the remote host, the target's host, and we also need to set our own host, so the L host. These two things we need to set. But before that, you could actually just check whether or not we are actually vulnerable. So we can say set our host to 10.10.36.125. Sorry, not with an equal. And then we can say check. So we're checking the component and it appears to be vulnerable. Now we can set our L host. And since I'm using the VPN, it is the tunnel 0. So I'm setting my side to tunnel 0. And what happens if you now say run? Then it's starting, it's doing the automatic check again. It says the target appears to be vulnerable. That is perfect. And after a few seconds, we should get exactly that. A command shell session 1 is opened. So who am I? Let's find out who I'm actually connected to as. So we have it running from that and we're data. Nice. So now we need to elevate it to a metapreter shell so we can background it. So do we want to background it? Yes, we do want to background it. We can still check. Under sessions, we have that active session. Remember last time around how we answered down here. Wait, let's just go through all of the tutorial. Remember how do we upgrade the last open session to metapreter session? We say sessions tag u tag minus tag 1. So sessions tag u minus 1. And now we're upgrading our session. Failed to start exploit multi-handler may be used by another process. Sessions. We have 2 of them running. Okay, so something seemed to not have worked as it should have. Well, let's see. So I used a part of this earlier on to try out if the connection actually works with metapreter. So that might now just be a bit of a problem here. But we can still try to connect to it. So sessions tag I. Let's connect to a session 2. And yeah, okay, so it works. Let me see. Less, where are we at? We're in some sort of web file. So if a web.config file, let's see that. Web.config. Is there anything interesting inside of here? We have some rewritten rules, import rules. Well, there's not much. Which file often contains useful credentials? in the index. Index.php is probably just this lorem ipsum other thing. No, it's just a large thing. We have the bootstraps app.php. So I'm actually go one folder outside. Nice. We can actually move around. So where do we might be able to find out the location, the credentials of the web application? That one is pretty interesting. We can now just look through it a little bit. So this might take some time. We can look at the processes, for instance, that are running. You can see there our dash shells are open. These two probably metapreter. This one, the first one from metasploit. We have Apache running, one thing as root, and a few other things with pretty interesting names, but that will not stop us now. Which are we now? Get paired. We have 32, so the other one are actually we are actually this one. Okay. So using metasploit, we can now go and check if we're actually in a, not that I might not find it back. If we're in a Docker container, we go to ls into root, and yes, we actually have the Docker end file here. So that makes us now suspicious that we're actually using Docker. So we can also start a shell using the shell command. So who am I again? So this works. We're currently in var top. So let's go to, I don't know, app or config. Is there anything interesting inside of config here? We have auth.php cache database. Database.php. Or anything interesting inside of this one here? I guess what they now want here as the answer for that is .php. Nope, the answer is not correct, so we're still looking for something else. We're using SQL as the database. So maybe our data is actually stored in an SQL file. So let's try that one out. .sql. This is also not correct. What else could we be doing? We can just look through that. We have a Redis host locally. Anything else we can find? Database, localhost. Username forge, password forge. No, password is empty, so we have forge. So maybe this is the database that contains them. No, also not correct. Is there anything else not inside of that one but outside here? Config database. Let's change the database folder. No, there's also nothing interesting here. Another thing that popped into my mind is we go one out and I don't know where actually at the moment. There we go. And if you list everything, then you actually see more than just with ls. And we have a .environment file created by the staff. So that might now be our answer. The environment file, see it, that one. What is inside of that? Oh, there's a lot of good stuff. We see the host, we see the port, see the username and the password of the database. We're using a Postgres. We actually have our API key in base 64 here. And is there anything else we want from that? Yeah, we want to know the database table that contains useful credentials. With the database Postgres. But that doesn't help us at the moment. We're connecting to a PGSQL one on our web server. And we have the username and the password. So what we could do now is what we saw earlier on, resolve actually that host name. So we can't do that inside of that one, so we go exit one out, so we're back in metapreter. Let's do resolve with that IP address, and we have a different IP address here. That is cool. So does this now help us? Which IP address are we actually on? Let's see. We can do something with that. Shall. Can we do ping on that IP address? 28, 1, 1. Ping is not found. Okay, so I guess we can't use ping here. But let's try to ping it from outside. Can we ping it from here? Oops. Ping 28.101.51. No, that doesn't work. So this is not accessible from the outside, sadly. So yeah, I've decided to just open up the walkthrough a little bit and use that as a hint for the next step. And I forgot that we can, after resolving, we could actually use route to add a route. So we need to background our session again. So first of all, let's exit. And then background our session again. So we're backgrounding the session 2. And we can now add a route. So that is the IP address of the database server which we are gonna be using. So route add 28.101.51 /q -1, and we have added this route. And since this is the Docker file that we're in a Docker container, so since they're using hard-coded IPs, we can add that as well. So we can also add the IP of our Docker container. Let's add this route as well. Maybe we're gonna use that later on. And if you want to know which routes you actually currently have, you can look them up with route print. So we have that one subnet and the second subnet win our session 3. So perfectly, this works out all fine, just as expected. And now we have credentials. So we can use that to now dump our database. We can again search for Postgres. There's a lot going on here, but the thing we want to do is a normal one, which does a Postgres scheme dump. So we're gonna use that one. So let's use the auxiliary scanner Postgres dump. And we're gonna run it with the Postgres running on the IP address that we just added to the route, 28.101.51 Postgres. Remember, we saw that from the beginning, and we also learned our username and password, which are also Postgres, and double up Postgres as the username and the password. And we're just gonna run that. And we have dumped our things. So we have one table with users and one with user IDs. So which one, what was the question again down here? We had the question, what database contains useful credentials? Remember, we look through them, we have here our table named user with the username, with the password, when it was created and when it was deleted. So I guess users should contain useful credentials. So next up, we need to find out what is actually the password of Santa. So for that, we now need to be able to connect to our Postgres database. And in order to that, we need to create a proxy within metasploit. So for that, we can actually use the socks proxy. We're just gonna use that. And then we need our host. Remember the one we discovered at the beginning, the one we have access to. We can use this host in order to run it, server host with the server port and the version. And we're gonna start the socks proxy server. With that, we now have a port exposed on the attacker's machine. In order to run other tools through it, we could use, for instance, curl or something else. We can again verify that. Let's see if this worked out. No, it's still running. I'm gonna fast forward until we have it actually started up. So I've decided to use another way in order to access it. If we again search for Postgres, there is auxiliary Postgres SQL, which we could use in order to just connect and have a generic query running on it. So let's try that one out. Use. Again, we can view the info of it. We need to set the rhost. So set rhosts, hosts to the IP address of our server 51, was the one we added earlier in the routes. And next up, we need to set the database. So set database to Postgres, I think it was. Username is Postgres. Password is also Postgres. So that works. So let's try it out. Exploit. Okay, query select version. Good. So we can actually connect to it. That is nice. Does this now work? We can now set the SQL command, so select version, to, let's say, select star from users. And then we can run the command again. And we've selected from our table username is Santa, and that is the password. So nice. We found the password of our Santa. So next up, we're gonna need to find out which ports are open on that machine. So how can we do that? We can first of all search for our socks. And we have the proxy sock server, which is the one that we probably want to use here. So we're gonna use that to start up a sock proxy server. So now let's use that one. We need to set nothing. We probably just need to run it. We're starting the socks proxy server. And it's running in the background. It's starting up the socks server. We can look at it for jobs. We have them now running. Perfect. So now let's try and connect to it. Let's see. So curl as a proxy to the socks 5 with 27.001 1080. And what we actually want to do now is to get some HTTP, the IP address of the second server. That's 0.1. What was that? So apparently I don't have curl installed. Just give me a second. Started? Yes. So I'm gonna make that bigger now. We actually get the result back. So nice. So it seemed that this worked, but what happens now if we try to use our proxy on the second one? Does anything happen there? So for the next part, we actually need proxy chains. So let's just quickly look if it is installed. Perfect, we have it already. So what we want to do here is use nmap in order to ping and probe for ports. Which ports do we want? We might scan for any common ports, but let's start off with a simple scan on our IP address 0.1 and see which other ports are open. Proxy chains. Sudo proxy chains nmap ss 27.17.0.1. There we go. So we don't need the .pack queue anymore. The host seems to be down. So let's try it with probing the ports. Yes, port specifications are illegal. Let's just try that one out first. I'm gonna skip it forward if it takes too long until there are the results back. So we can actually use proxy chains here the same way as we used curl earlier on with a socks proxy. This time it just takes the proxies from our metasploit or metapreter and uses them with the routes we added. So this way we can now do the scan. Maybe if this takes too long, I'm gonna use the ports that they also defined down below. So the most interesting ports probably are gonna be 22. Let's see that. Sudo proxy chains. We're gonna use nmap with a ping probe on the ports 22, 80. HTTPS could be interesting. And 421 port. No, it seems to be down. Oh. And actually the IP address, of course. 0.1. So minus instead of dot. There we go. That was a lot faster. So for those ports we see 22 and the thing are open, Postgres is closed because it's running on another instance. We don't have HTTPS, but the other two came back as okay. So I guess the two ports which are open are 22 and 80. So now we can try to use proxy chains again to SSH with Santa at the IP address 107.17.0.1. That would be my guess. Yes, I want to connect. And the password we found from the database. Let's see if this works. Yes, and we're root on the second server. So since he reused his password, we can now cat the root.txt file. And we have the whole flag. Nice. So this took a little bit longer than before. I was a bit rusty with metasploit and searchsploit in general, so that was good to catch up a little bit on. Most of the pivoting stuff was pretty okay. Sadly, it didn't work from the beginning onwards, so there are some few cuts inside, but I hope you got a little bit of an introduction into penetration testing and red teaming using metasploit. This was it for the 9th day of the advent of Cyber 2022. Tomorrow we'll go over day 10. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if you actually enjoyed the content, and turn on the notification bell in order to be notified once the next video is released. Other than that, I'm Avocari, and have fun hacking your way through the advent of Cyber 2022. Take care.